Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I am so thrilled that you are here. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and my amazing guest today. I am so excited that you're here because this is part of a series that I'm learning about myself and going to be hopefully an even better person, entrepreneur, all that good stuff. But I also know you have tons of choices when it comes to listening to a podcast. So thank you so much for spending some time with me, whether you're on a walk, driving, washing your dishes, whatever it is. So thank you so much. And I'm thrilled because we have an amazing guest today. And this is a guest that I connected with through a community, which is always fun. And I was looking for someone to help me understand human design. And this whole idea of something that I know nothing about, but to learn about myself. And so I have brought Adriana onto the podcast. I'm so excited that you are here. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a really exciting conversation we're going to have, actually unpacking your human design chart. So this is going to be epic.
I'm really pumped about it because, like I've told you before we hit record, I know nothing. I remember, gosh, it was probably 2 or 3 years ago. I go away with some of my biz besties about once a year and we talk about business, but we're also just enjoying each other as well. And one of them asked, "Have you ever looked up your human design?" And I was like, "I don't even know what words you're speaking right now." And so immediately I Google it, try and figure it out. And then it populates with a lot of information that was very overwhelming. So I was like, this is cool, but I think I needed to have someone explain this to me. And so, of course, it took a few years for me to find you, but here we are. And so before we get into my chart, which I'm super excited to do, could you introduce yourself and tell everyone listening a little bit about you and maybe how you ended up learning about human design and now helping people understand
Absolutely. I will keep that long story short and sweet.
it?
My name is Adriana Keefe. I'm a human design expert and guide and speaker. I'm also a mom of three and a wife and an animal lover. So at any given time, you'll find like a bunch of random zoo animals at my house. I went to school for veterinary. So
Oh, that's
this
so
is
neat.
kind of where the science side of me meets the spiritual side. And I teach human design in a very unique way. It's not just educating, it's embodiment. It is trauma informed. I used human design to heal after years of childhood abuse, where therapy was helpful, but I still felt like a shell of a human. And then I was introduced to the system by a coach that I had. And now at the time, I didn't believe in anything spiritually. So, I thought horoscopes were cool. I was like, yeah, astrology, I'm a Taurus, woohoo. Other than that, I didn't know anything. But she showed me this thing called my human design. And it was shortly after having my second daughter, where I was in a career crisis. And I felt deeply unfulfilled. And she showed me this thing that you actually might resonate because we are the same type. It said, I'm a manifesting generator. And it said that I am someone who's multi-passionate, multi-hyphenate, energetic being, where most of my life I was very much made to feel like a quitter because I would get bored of something and want to move on. Or like I was too much of whatever, diagnosed with ADHD at a young age. And it just resonated on a deep level. But much like you, I heard about it and I didn't fully take it on in the moment because I think it had that big question of what does this mean? If this is accurate, what does this actually mean as far as the universe goes and the planets and all of that? And I had to sit with that for a little bit because I'm actually a very skeptical person. I think that's actually really healthy for me in teaching this because when I learn something new, I'm like, but why? And
Right.
how? And like I go and I experiment with it. And then so eventually it came back around to me when I was still struggling. And I was gently reminded by the universe that I had this roadmap in front of me. And it actually clicked, where I know it's very overwhelming to many people. Astrology feels overwhelming to me, even though this has an astrology component to it. But something about human design felt very practical and easy to understand. So I started implementing it in my own life. And then the business was kind of formed out of that because people were like, wait, how are you doing this? What are you doing?
Right.
So long story short.
Well, it was wonderful. I feel like you did pretty good. I'm looking
Oh,
at the
good.
time. I feel like you did that in like 3 minutes. So kudos to you for that. And I think the background is super helpful. I definitely think hearing that you were skeptical and asked why, that's super helpful for anyone who falls into that category. Some people won't, right? And they'll just gravitate towards something new and give it a shot. But a lot of people, I think, are like, but let me just think about this for a hot second before I start changing my life and doing things. And it's also helpful to hear, like, because there's a lot. My first, when I looked it up, I mean, I even said, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of
Yeah.
things going on here. And I was interested, but in that moment, for whatever reason, it was like, well, I think maybe I just got in my head about like, well, this is going to take a little bit for me to understand. I just like working with other people. So I knew it would be better if I had someone like yourself explain it a little bit more. And I really appreciated your sharing of your story because this podcast is filled with accidental entrepreneurs. So people who stumbled into entrepreneurship because someone was like, hey, how did you do that? And somehow they started a business. So you're not in bad company over here. I mean, everyone feels the same of like, you found something which I think is so beautiful when all of us who kind of go down a different career path of this idea of being an entrepreneur can find something like, oh, this helped me. Now I can help other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was unintentionally intentional, I would call it.
Right.
Because I didn't grow up in a family of entrepreneurs. I didn't know that was an option. I did the thing that I was told to do, go to college, get a butt ton of student debt, and then not be able to survive because of your student debt. And so I knew there was like this, actually, you'll likely resonate with this looking at your chart. There was this deep need for meaning and fulfillment that I couldn't stop searching for. And then at one point I realized, well, it's because I have to do this myself. I don't work well for other people. Like I need to do this myself. So I knew I wanted to be on my own in some capacity, but I had no idea what that would look like at all.
Right. And I think a lot of people start with that of even just this idea about it of like, can I do this? It's that curiosity. But then we can so quickly get in our heads like, well, how do I do that? How is it going
Mm-hmm.
to work? And that stops a lot of people, which is why I have a podcast, right? So that people can hear inspiring stories of like, actually just take one step at a time and you'll figure it out. Not that it's easy, but it's just that we have to break it down. And so that's what we get to do today about this. So before we go into my chart a little bit more, I'm curious about this because a lot of like this is part of a series where I'm learning about myself, right? And trying to adapt that into my entrepreneurship journey and be better human, better entrepreneur. A lot of things are personality tests where you answer a lot of questions. This one is very interesting to me because you don't have to do that. All you have to do is put in your birthday, your location, and is that it? I think it's just
And
two
yeah,
things.
your time of birth, day of birth, and location. Yeah.
So, how in the world does this work?
Okay, this is like my favorite because, you know, I used to take Enneagram tests. I would work with a specific coach who wanted to know your Enneagram.
Mm-hmm.
And none of those personality tests felt right to me. I mean, I did get two different Enneagram results at two different points in my life. So that had me questioning things. But I was a deeply conditioned child of a lot of trauma. And there was a lot of things that I wasn't being authentic with in myself. And so I know that personality tests work really well for some people, but I didn't click with it. And this having a basis of science, I was like, ooh, this is
Right.
intriguing. So to keep the science short and sweet, that's where the astrology component comes in, where the sun, the moon, the planets, where everything is lined up at your exact moment of birth. It creates an imprint in you. It's actually called a neutrino stream. So they're tiny itty bitty like little molecules that are imprinted into you as soon as you come out, and technically within the human design system 88 days before birth as well. And this is like where your sun sign comes from, your rising sign, all of that. It's very similar in human design. It shows what your imprints are from the sky at the moment of your birth and a little bit beforehand. Interesting fact that if we're talking science meets spiritual and skepticism, that I found really interesting, the original channeler of human design, and this was just in 88, so this is a very recent system that was channeled through. He channeled the word neutrino and the science behind it before science actually dubbed neutrinos a thing, which was very interesting because they were two completely different things. And then there's also currently in science being proved that the 64 gates that are within human design, which come from other old systems, this is just a bunch of old systems put together like Kabbalah, I Ching, all of that. These 64 energetic gates that are in the human design system are matching up to the 64 genetic codons within our DNA. So there's a lot of really cool research that's kind of piecing these things together.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that because I was like, how in the world is it my birthday and location, time, and how, like, what if someone else, because I'm assuming this is true, that someone else was born at the exact same time in the exact same hospital, right? I would assume
Yep.
that that's true. So
Yep.
we would be the same?
Yes, and so my best friend's a twin. So of course I'm like, oh, I gotta look up both
Right.
of you and see. So I don't remember down to the nitty gritty if every single thing was the same because within a few minutes of their birth, there could be tiny tweaks in the sky. But ultimately, their charts were the same, and they're two very different people because we
Right.
still need to take into consideration the way that they were raised. You know, even though we're raised by the same parents in a lot of cases, like I have two sisters, we have extremely different outlooks on our childhood. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
some similarities, but different because we're treated differently by the people in our lives. So the environment still has a factor around conditioning and the way that you show up. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, their energy, if you went down to the actual nitty gritty of their chart, is they have the same gifts, the same strengths for sure.
Oh, that's interesting. So that was very, very helpful because I was just thinking, like, two people are so different. I don't understand how this would work.
Mm-hmm.
But our environment shapes who we become over time anyway. And so we're talking about your human design is decided in a moment, and your life really takes shape over time. Does that
Yeah.
say it
Yeah.
right?
Yes, 1,000%. Because you can have, like, for you, one of your biggest gifts is leadership. It's all over your chart. Now, if you went to college for art and then your twin sister went to college for, I don't know, music or business, could still be living through that leadership strength, but in very different avenues and based on the experiences and things that piqued their curiosity in life.
Well, that's really helpful. So I see, like, your experiences and your lived experience really shapes, but it's that core characteristic or trait or strength
Yeah.
that's there. It
Yep.
just forms in a little bit differently.
Yep.
This is super helpful. Thank you for
Good.
answering the 101 questions that I have thought
You're
since we
welcome.
connected. Okay, so maybe what the next thing to do is, and if this is not easy, you don't have to do this and I can pull it and put it in the show notes or something. But there's a certain number of categories. I don't think there's a ton of them. Can you give a brief overview of who is what, or is that not
Yes.
helpful?
No,
Okay.
I can. Absolutely. So ultimately, I should back up and say what human design really is. What's the point of human design? And human design is a system that teaches us our body's consciousness. I think at every point in someone's life, you've had something in your body that told you something was right or wrong. You didn't follow it and you were kicking yourself in the butt because you were like, oh, my body was telling me differently. So this is really a roadmap to teaching you how to communicate and listen to your body, which ultimately I think we've learned through weird lessons in life has a higher knowing than we can even comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding how to make the right decisions, how to interact with the world around you, all of that is found within human design. And it actually gives you practical, tangible ways to do that I felt other systems weren't giving. Like, I had multiple astrology readings, which were awesome. I'm totally badass. I get it. But also, what do I do with this information? Human design literally tells you what to do. So within the human design system, high level, there are 5 types, which I also resisted because my chart's very rebellious, and I'm like, don't you tell me I'm put in a box. But it's really helpful to understand the different auras, which the word aura again is scientifically proven. It has to do with the energy that extends outwardly around you. It's like when you walk into a room and feel someone was just fighting with someone else, you feel the tension, like all of this is
Yeah.
energy. And so, super high level, there are 5 types within the design system. Of course, everything is extremely nuanced, especially around astrology, time of year you were born, all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
the first type, which is the one that I already mentioned, which is what you and I are, manifesting generators. We're about 35-ish% of the population.
Okay.
In total, both the generator types make up about 70% of the population. So, in that sense, we're the majority, but that's because we are here to be the builders, the doers, the taking something that's already been built or started and building upon it. And we have a lot of energy. We have a lot of things we want to put our energy into. You can't really make us focus on just one thing. Like within your business, how many different services do you offer?
Over the years, I mean, I could
Even
list out
just at
so
one
many.
point in time, like right now, how many?
Right now, I have three.
Yeah, because it's really hard to just do one, right? You get bored, like so bored. And that's really gold for us. We need to be able to have the multifaceted approach. We're very nonlinear. We will jump all over the place. It's not going to look like the straight and narrow path that society tells us. And then we have generators, so without the word manifesting. And they are the other workhorses, the other builders. They're the people who can truly obsess over something and master a skill through that obsessive repetition and building on something. And then we kind of take a lot of these things that are built as manifesting generators and we're like, oh, but what if we add this to it and we add this to it? And then we have manifestors. We're only about 9% of the population. They are here to create, to start the fires, to start the sparks. Not the best finishers. They don't technically have that energy to do and bring things through to completion. That's what the generator types are here to do. So the manifestors are like, ooh, but what if we started this? And then people like you and I are like, oh, I could take that and run with it. So they spark those fires. And then projectors are about 20% of the population. They're extremely gifted in efficiency, fixing problems. They're like the people who take what we've built, look at it, and say, oh, we could do this better. We could make this easier. So they're very gifted guides and leaders and teachers. They do not have that sustainable energizer bunny energy that the generator types do. Therefore, our society has led them to a lot of burnout. Same with manifestors. Any non quote energy being, our society is just burning them out. But they can do so much in 2 to 3 hour spurts because they're very efficient. So that never makes them any less qualified to do anything. They're better at most of my job in 2 to 3 hours than I am. And then we have reflectors who are only 1% of the population, and they're
Wow.
like the critics. They reflect back the general health and stability of their environment. So they're almost like at the end of creating the movie, where the projectors were the director on the movie set, the reflectors are like, ooh, this is how the project looks. This is what's happening, reflecting back if it's great, good, could be better, if it's poor. That's the general idea of what their energy is here to do.
That is fascinating. Okay, so let me repeat them back so that I remember. Manifesting generator, generator, manifestor, projector, reflector. There's five. Okay. It was really interesting to me when you said the percentage of people. It's interesting that there's seems like a very much a majority, and then there's a few that are really small percentages, which is really fascinating to me. That, I mean, I kind of expected it to be just kind of all about the same. I don't know why.
Yeah, I actually might have had that same thought when I first noticed the numbers. I don't
Hmm.
remember thinking that, but actually, now that you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I kind of felt the same too. But it doesn't make sense from a universal, from a collective standpoint for it to be equal, because then I don't think there would be enough building momentum. I don't think enough people would be able to use their energy to build if we had more in just creation mode all the time but not finishing,
Hmm.
or more just in reflection mode. Does that make sense?
It does. It really does. It makes sense of why I thought, oh, I just think it would be a roughly equal and everything. That makes sense, but it also makes sense like that wouldn't work out in terms of like the jobs we need to have on this planet. That's interesting. Okay, so if someone is listening to this and they want to know their type, where would you suggest they go? Can they just Google it? Obviously, someone can work with you, and we'll open that door of how they can connect with you. But what is that first step of figuring it out?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I probably should have said that before I mentioned all the 5 types so they could follow along. You can download it right on my website, adrianakeefe.com, and then you can get your free chart there.
Great. Perfect. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes so anyone listening or watching can pause, go get their type, and now, come back and listen. So you asked me for my birthday, time of day. And just in case someone is listening and hasn't known there, so my birthday is July 26, 1984. I was born at 4:08 p.m. And I was born in the city of Ocala in the state of Florida. So that is where all of my information is. I don't know if I should give it, but I feel like that's probably available on the internet.
Yeah, that's whatever.
But I am a manifesting generator. So that's what it came up with. And if you're watching this, you'll be able to see a chart on the screen. But if not, you can just listen. The thing I can understand is the manifesting generator. And then there's a crap ton of other information that I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. So that's what I'd love to learn a little bit more.
Let me share it now. Okay. So now we see Amanda's beautiful insides over here, all of your chart. So yes, it can look very overwhelming. But something that jumped out at me right away, I think we even talked about this when we spoke previously, was that you have a lot of energy. If you look at any colored in lines, it means that that's like a flow of energy. Chi, if you will, if you're familiar with Eastern medication and all of that.
Can I ask a question about that? I
Yeah.
feel so bad interrupting you, but when I'm looking at this, so I'm looking at it, and on the left side, as I'm looking at it, there's more colored lines on one side. Does that matter?
Do you mean as opposed to like feminine versus masculine, left
I have
versus
no
right?
idea really what I mean. It's noticeable to me that I'm like, they kind of look like veins to me. So that's kind of what I'm looking at here. Is like, so those lines, those vein looking things, like there's, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 colored ones. Whereas on the other side, there is not. So to me, I was like, whoa, that's a noticeable difference. But I'm just curious if it makes a difference for real.
So if not in the sense that you might be thinking, it doesn't mean quote any one specific thing. What it is because when you have these centers here, this is like if you're familiar with the chakra system, these centers will be familiar to you because we use that system, except we recognize that we're 9-centered beings instead of 7-centered beings. So this is saying that you have an open head center, open ajna, which I have a whole guide on my website too. If we don't have enough time to talk about all this, you can totally download it for free there. Open heart center, open solar plexus center. So that's saying that these are places of wisdom where you take in information from people around you and you, almost like a reflector, reflect it back out. You're basically holding space for other people and showing them their own. Solar plexus is about emotions, so showing them their own emotions and feelings. Heart center is all about ego and willpower, material things, showing them their sense of self-worth. Does that make sense?
It does. So what I'm seeing, and for everyone listening, so we're looking at, there's some like triangles and squares and stuff, and that's what she was pointing to. And they're on the chart white, open, is what I'm understanding is the white is meaning open, and the colored is, you didn't say closed, but that's the opposite of that. So I would think that would be the word to use. But so open is more of like helping other people.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and. So, I mean, we know this. So the colored in centers mean that they're defined. You have definition. You have a consistent access to the energy of that center. And, thinking about deep fulfillment and meaning to your life, you are created on purpose. You are created purposely with these centers being open so that you can work with the people that you are working with and guide them through exactly what they needed to be guided through. Now, with the centers that are colored in, where you have definition, where you have your own consistent access to the energy of these centers, you're still helping people. Like this is your throat center right here. this is all about communication and manifestation. You are here to use your voice to bring to form things for yourself, for other people. So it's still very much created on purpose, but it's going to be your own consistent way of doing it, not speaking through the voice of someone else.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
So when you see that on your chart, it's connecting to other centers. That's what makes them defined. It's sending energy from one center to another.
Mm-hmm.
And you're very, very defined. You have a lot of energetic gifts within your sacral center, which is creativity, power, doing, like the Energizer Bunny. This is where generators get their energy from. And so you literally have a throat, speaking, communication directly connected to how do we get things done and do it right now. So you're definitely an action taker. There's a lot of like, oh, I can figure out exactly how to do this and how to communicate and bring this to form. That's the first thing that jumps out at me for your chart. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, 100%. I mean, I feel like it's so interesting because I've been told for quite a while, I would say all my adult life, working and definitely as an entrepreneur for sure, is like you can get it done, like in some form or fashion of that, which is interesting because I feel like so words out there say like if you have an idea, if you're the person that has an idea, it's often hard to follow through. Whereas I don't have that issue. If I have an idea that I'm very excited about, I can finish that idea. And that has been the way in which I've created a career for myself is helping people, finish the things that they want to do. But it's interesting because I hear so many people talk about the opposite of that, of having the idea but not being able to finish it.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to, disconnect's not the right word, but kind of. I mean, even with my own chart, there's a bit of a disconnect from thinking about something and having to wait for it to click on in the rest of my body. Like I need to be around other people who help me formulate and communicate or figure things out and how to go about doing it. Whereas you would just have that direct connection. You're like, this is what we got to do. Got to do it. And it just takes me a minute.
That's
Or
so
other people.
interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, especially because we have the same technical title, right? But we approach things differently. That's really helpful for me to hear, and I'm sure it's helpful for other people too. Thank you. That's really neat. So the line that connects the square at the top to the square at the bottom, that's what helps me have the thought, use the voice, and get it done.
Yes, 1,000%. And it's also to throw in another one there. It's also directly connected to your G center, which is the diamond right in the middle. And this is your center of inner knowing. This is your center of self-love, knowing what path you're on, knowing your vision. So you not only have that, okay, this is how we're going to do it, but you have this deep knowing of like, this is the right way to do it. Does that resonate?
I feel like yes and no. I feel like now, and the reason I'm saying it like that is because I think that I have, because of lived experience, right, along the way, I doubt that a lot of, is it the right thing? And I don't necessarily think that that's natural. I think I've just learned to be like, well, maybe I should think twice about it or something. So I have become, whether this is something I was born with or not, I don't know. I worry about everything and I overthink a lot of things. And so I think that gets in my way of trusting the feeling that is probably there all the time.
There's two things that jump out at me about that. The first being you have an open head center, which I have as well. It's the very tippity top of the body graph. There's no color in it. And this is where we take in ideas and inspiration from all around us. It's not our own consistent way of thinking or taking in this information. And there's a shadow and a light to everything. So the shadow of this open head center is we then spiral trying to think about all the things, try to figure all the things out. We have so many ideas. We don't know what to do. Overthinking. The second piece of that is if you were to see something that says profile, it has two numbers. It says 3/5.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you start talking about previous life experience has told me that I need to slow down and think, it sounds to me like you had been living your ultimate line 3, which is that of the experimenter, trial and error. That of someone who is built very resilient because you're going to fail a lot. You're also going to succeed a lot. But part of your purpose here is to be that action taker who just tries it, just does the thing, and then tells the collective, the world, what works and what doesn't work. And I can't help but wonder if older version of you was very like much leaning into that line 3 and just taking the messy action, doing the things. And, we haven't normalized failure in our society. And maybe now that's impacted the way that you see your decision making. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, it's interesting. I feel like in some areas of my life, like I am still very resilient and willing to try anything, very much so entrepreneurship, right? I mean, I will try and figure something out, and I am willing to look silly, to fail, to fall down, to talk about it. And like you said, like, and then share, like, this is what worked, this is what didn't. I talk about it on the podcast all the time. Any client I've ever had will tell you, oh my gosh, Amanda always tells me what she did and how I could do it a different way and avoid what she did. That I feel like comes very naturally in entrepreneurship. Whereas when I think about other areas of my life, I'm like, well, I'm way more like, well, I have to research a lot more before I'll make that decision. Stupid things like which purse to buy or something. Like I'll overthink that decision. Whereas in entrepreneurship, I'm like, I'll just buy something, and if it doesn't work, I'll buy the next thing. So does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I actually see this a lot because our business kind of is a mask that we can put on. Almost like Beyonce is like Sasha Fierce
Oh,
is
yeah.
like her little persona. So we can hide behind our business a lot and be like, well, it's a business. Like it's not me. Sometimes we can feel like it is my own self-worth.
Sure.
But I see that a lot where in their own personal lives, they're afraid to take risks. But when it comes to business, again, it could be part of that deep knowing of like, well, I know deeply I'm going to succeed. I just have to keep doing it until I succeed. The other piece that I just want to make you aware of is that your authority, this is your decision-making process. This is the way that your body is designed to tell you what's right and what's wrong for you. Your authority is called sacral. It's literally this energizer bunny piece right here is your gut response. It's a gut yes or a gut no. It's like what everyone says, oh, trust your gut. It's actually not true for everyone, but for you it is. So I'm curious if you were to start playing with that immediate yes or no, have people in your world ask you yes or no questions and maybe close your eyes so you can kind of tune out everything else and just ask, or let your body answer for you, learn that language before it goes to the mind, which is a lot harder to do than it sounds.
Yeah.
That is actually going to be the way that you make correct decisions for yourself.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Okay, so as you know, I was going to ask you, like, what is something I can do? This is the thing that I believe is the thing. We can keep talking, but so because I have a harder time, I mean, and really I attributed this to decision fatigue, which I do think is real for sure.
For real.
But like at the end of the day, like I can't make a decision about dinner at the end of the day. Like I can't do it. It is impossible. If someone is like, where do you want to go eat or what do you want to eat? I'm like, I would rather not eat.
That's the worst thing to ask any generator type because we all need yes or no questions. Don't ask us anything open-ended, especially around food.
Okay.
Ask us yes or no.
Okay, so the yes or no is really important. I'm
Yes.
glad you reiterated that because I will overthink things, worry about making the right decision. This is helpful. So I need more yes or no questions. And what I need to do is really start giving myself time to feel it, which I feel like is going to be very hard for me. But I'll journal about this. Like my thought process with going through these interviews was like, okay, I'm going to track everything pretty much of like the things I'm doing. So I'll write it down for 30 days. I mean, how many decisions, how many yes or no questions can I answer in 30 days? It'll be a lot.
A lot, yeah. Even simple things, like practice with simple things. Like, do
Yeah.
I want a coffee right now? or do I want tea right now?
Mm, okay. Yes or no questions. So what do I do? This is me being super tactical here. What do I do if someone's like, where do you want to go eat? Because I really do have trouble with that. Like, do I need to reframe it for myself as a yes or no question to feel
You
the
can.
answer?
You can. I would say for me, it felt easier when someone outside of myself asked me a question. I think the more that you get better at understanding your body's language, you can do it
Mm-hmm.
yourself much easier. But I will literally ask my husband to restate it. Nope, give me some options. Give me one option at a time. We have 3 kids. They're all different types, of course, but 2 of them are generator types. And so I know that they need the yes or no's. And I'll
Okay.
always see my husband be like, what do you guys want for breakfast? And they're like, and I'm like, let me in. I'm like, do you want sausage? Do you want eggs? Do you want pancakes? And we just wait for every yes or no. And you can really see it in kids too. Like practicing with kids is fun because they're uninhibited in their
Right.
response.
Oh, that's so helpful. Thank you for breaking that down because I
You're
realized that it was
welcome.
a very, very specific thing. But I think, and maybe that's part of who I am, is I would get hung up with that, of that idea of like, oh, I'm not feeling the answer. But rephrasing as a yes or no question, I do believe is going to be super helpful.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to tell you. I cannot wait. And so when these episodes go live, at the end of the episode, I'll put in my update. So the person listening to this and watching this, they don't have to wait. But it'll be really interesting to see what the next 30 days looks like for me. But I'll tell you in an email.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I'm looking at this chart, there's some numbers at the top and a lot of other things on the side. So you really went to the map in the middle, which was super helpful, and kind of telling me what the triangles and the squares and the diamond is. What's everything else?
So where you see the astrological or the signs on the side, these are the astrological glyphs. So every planet is going to have something imprinted you from when you were born, like whatever energy that planet was in at the time, that's going to then translate into your energy. Within human design, the thing that human design was able to piece together for astrology that astrology hadn't yet channeled was that we have a conscious side of us, which is like our personality, and then we have an unconscious side of us, which is like our body. They in human design they talk about the driver and the car. You can be the driver of your car, and it's also different than the health of your car that you're driving. So, on the right hand side, everything you see has to do with your personality, your more conscious side of you. Like when I talk about it, it tends to. And on the left side is your design or your body or your unconscious side of you. This can be pieced together through noticing and creating awareness over time. Maybe other people have said these things about you. But every number that you see correlates to a gate. These are the 64 gates that I mentioned at the beginning, which are like energetic gifts of yours. They're qualities, traits, strengths. And then when you see the point 5, point 3, these are actually your profile lines. So where if you're watching this on YouTube, where I showed you profile 3, 5 at the bottom, that actually comes from the point 3, point 3, point 5 over on these sides. And much like your sun sign in astrology, the sun on the top of both sides is going to be your largest imprint. Therefore, that's where that you get that generalized profile from, the archetype of your personality. And then every other trait or gate gift you have also falls within a certain spectrum of a profile line, adding more nuance to the way that you show that energetic trait. But your biggest imprint is literally in gate 31, which is a gate of leadership. It's in the throat center right here if you're watching on YouTube. So this means the way that you communicate yourself in a very leadership oriented style. Listen when you talk. It's a gate of influence. And then your fifth line, your profile, your energy on the other side is that of someone who's very practical and efficient. So your 3 and your 5, you're taking that experimenter, that messy action, and you're figuring out what works and what doesn't, and you're putting it into practical, tangible systems and steps for people to understand, making it easy. My human design mentor is also a 3-5, and literally her tagline for her business is human design made simple. Does that resonate with you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, people tell me all the time that yes, I finish things, but what I do really well is help other people finish things, and it's by breaking it down.
Yeah,
Is
that's
because
it.
I can easily break something down that seems really, really complicated. Someone says, I want to start that podcast. I want to finish the book. I want to start the business. I want to whatever it is. And I'll say, "Oh, it's okay. Like we've got this. Let's just come up with a plan." Comes pretty naturally to me, whereas I didn't realize that that isn't something that everyone does naturally.
I just hired a new person for my business to handle a lot of systems and back end stuff. And in my mind, I wanted someone who had a line 5 in their top profile. Of course, I didn't say that, but
Sure.
every single person who applied, there were 4 applicants, all of which had the line 5. So I was like, yes,
That's awesome.
yes. And
That's
she's
fascinating.
fantastic, the one I
Well,
hired.
great. I mean, what a great tool. And we think about companies use personality test all the time. I have no idea if they'll ever use human design, but someone in an entrepreneurship role can use whatever they want when they're hiring and helping find that right person. So I think it's great. I
Yeah,
love this.
and bigger corporations are opening up to this. I've recently spoken at
Nice.
Quest Diagnostics and some
Oh,
other
nice.
companies. And so they're also starting to understand that there's more at play on a deeper individual level. So it's really fascinating to see people use this in all different areas.
Yeah, I think it's really neat no matter what someone resonates with, whether it's this or I mean, a long time ago, it was like Myers-Briggs, right? Like we've all heard of these types of, especially if we're in the corporate world, all these different types of personality tests. And I think it's like just find the thing that works for you, that resonates with you. And I think we as humans like to hear like, oh yeah, that resonates. Like when you were saying you're able to do this and this is something that comes naturally to you. And I'm like, yeah, that is me. Yeah. It's helpful to know I'm clicking with something.
hmm And it also helps you give grace to other people,
Yeah.
understanding they're just not designed that way. Especially when it comes to time management. Manifesting generators are known as time benders. We can do things, we just see and relate to time in a very different way. So that's allowed me to give my husband a lot more grace when it comes to personal and home and kids and the way he sees time. I'm like, yeah, we're not going to be able to do all that by the time we have to leave, but it's just not going to happen.
Right. Oh, that's so fascinating. And I think it's so important to remember that what you just said of part of this is this series that I wanted to learn about myself, but the other part was to help other people learn about themselves, but also like it allows me to be a better coach when I
hmm
know more about other people. And so through all of this, I've been able to learn more about other people as well. And like you said, giving grace. I think about, how much more grace I have today, 7 years after starting a business than I did 7 years ago, when it would be like, why isn't the person taking action?
Yeah.
They said they wanted to do that. And it's like, oh, well, they just had to think about it for a little bit longer or really tap into that, whatever. And so it's really helpful to think about it, like you said, and give grace to other people.
Yep.
So the thing that I am coming away with this to wrap this all up, because I'll need to do my 30-day recap, is my to-do list, as the person who needs a to-do list over here, is to reflect on how I feel when I am asked a yes or no question. And I'm going to do my best to document this. I think it's going to be harder than I think, even though I know it's going to be hard to recognize the feeling. Do you have any suggestions or points of advice for me with?
Yeah, because consistency for manifesting generators can feel all over the place. I have so many different post-it notes, reminders on my phone, whatever, to just stop in the moment. And for this example, it would be, if there was something you had a question on throughout the day or someone asked you a question, in those moments you tend to forget, oh, let me just check in with my gut response. So what if you had a reminder go off at noon every day or whatever, that is just check in with your body. What is it saying about this question right now? Or at the end of the day, before you go to bed. And I know everyone is like against journaling when they're so busy. Listen, I get it. Like I have 3 kids, but writing these things down and taking a moment to check in with what your
Mm-hmm.
body's telling you creates evidence for you as you move through this experiment, which is all trial and error for everyone at that point. So any way that you can remind yourself to use those tools, whether it's a sticky note, you should see my sticky notes. I have 5 here right
I
now,
love it.
but all the reminders on my phone just to stop you because we just get really busy and remember the things that you wanted to prioritize that aren't that easy to just bring to the front of the mind all the time.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think you'll find this interesting. So I part of this is I talk to an Enneagram person as well, and I'm a 3. And one of the things that I am charged to do over the next 30 days is to celebrate wins because I tend to not do that. This is not going to be a surprise to you at all. And I have to have a reminder to do it.
I have one that goes off at 5 p.m. every day. It's called Stack My Wins, and I put
Oh,
it in
I
a
love
document
it.
every day. And it could be the smallest thing. It could be that a friend reached out and said hi that I've been missing. It's just the more you give your brain evidence of what's working, the more you're seeing what's working.
Right. And so this really, like, they're all coming together, all of these different conversations that I've had with, all of these different components that I'm putting together and learning about myself. Nothing is saying anything different, which is really cool. Everything is pretty much saying the same thing in just a different way and tapping into the strengths, but also that your girl needs reminders because I will just keep going. And you use the term Energizer Bunny today several times, and I will just keep going. And so slowing down is very, very
Yep, I hear that. I really do.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I would love for you to share how people can connect with you because I know that everyone is going to want to do that. And we'll wrap this.
Absolutely. So on my website, of course, you can find most of my links, but I'm on Instagram at Adri Keefe, Adri Keefe, because of course my full name was taken, so I had to make it hard for everyone. If you're very interested in this whole human design thing, I do have a podcast where I put all my content really. I'm not on social a ton. So the podcast is called the No BS Human Design Podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here today and for everyone listening. I really hope that you take that next step of figuring out what your human design is. So go to Adriana's website and do that. But Adriana, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.